I'm Marky Billson at Tri-City Sports Now, which can be heard on 1420 WEMB Sports Radio, as well as jetbroadcasting.live on the net. Take it with your iPhone, your iPad, your tower computer, wherever you may be. And also, you can watch the show now. We are back streaming on Facebook for Facebook Live. So, this morning I read in the paper that Bert Rechichar had died. And I, time to time, make references to Bert Rechichar. I knew Bert Rechichar. Bert Rechichar, if you don't know, is a Tennessee Volunteers legend. Bert Rechichar is, I passed away at the age of 89. In 1951, not only as a star football player on the Vols did he lead them to the national championship. Now, in those days, the national champion was crowned before the bowl game. And so there is some with these national championships that some teams declare. It's like, well, you really weren't the best because Maryland beat you in the bowl game that year. And I remember Rechichar telling me I was hit on the opening kickoff in that Sugar Bowl game back on January 1, 52 against Maryland. I was hit so hard, harder than ever in my football career. Oh my goodness, even in the NFL. And anyway, he also, though, was a baseball player. And he led the Vols to the 51 College World Series. So this is quite the athlete. I want to think about this. You are playing in your first ever NFL game. First NFL game. It is your franchise's first NFL game. And in this game, you beat pretty much the reigning, the team that's sort of the gold standard of the NFL at the time, let's just say. Kind of considered to be that, prestigious, most prestigious franchise, that sort of thing. Not only do you beat them, you remember when the Houston Texans, their first game was a victory against the Dallas Cowboys, kind of along those lines. But your first NFL game, not only that, you kick the longest field goal in the history of the National League, which is how the Saints announcer described Tom Dempsey's record-kicking field goal. It was never the National Football League. It was always, Tom Dempsey kicks the longest field goal in the history of the National League. Well, National Football League, and yet Bert Rechichar had the record set in 1953, Week 1, Baltimore Colts' first ever game, 56-yard field goal. Now, the goalposts were on the goal line in those days. That didn't change until 1974, but he kicked it from, his own 44-yard line, straight ahead, longest field goal in history, 56 yards. Give you an example, to this day, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who've only been around since 1933, they've never had a 56-yard field goal kick. The record for them is 55. So, think about this for a second. All the soccer style, the AstroTurf, the Mile High of Denver, which is now where Jason Elam or someone like that can go kick a 64-yarder. That's how that's it. No. Baltimore Memorial Stadium, where Cal Ripken played, where John Unitas played, all those guys. Yeah. And it was at the end of the first half, and it beat the Bears 13-10. And that's quite a debut. Now, let me tell you how I met Bert Rechichar. This was back when I was a sports writer at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And I primarily covered high school sports for them. I did other reporting for major sports, freelancing it for other papers, but the PG, my main thing was writing features about local athletes and covering with features the various local teams, usually high school. I did a lot of high school hockey, which was big up there. But then this time, it was girls soccer, and I want to say that I'm trying to remember. Bell Vernon, I think, was the school that I was writing the story about. Anyway, I'm gathering quotes after the game, and I'm actually, following some people onto the bus. And I am introduced at that point to the bus. Do you know who this is? It's the guy driving the Belle Vernon girls soccer team's bus. I don't know who this is. No. This is Bert Rechichar. He once had the longest field goal in the National Football League. Driving the bus at, for the Belle Vernon girls soccer team. And you're like, shouldn't this man be on some sort of Mount Rushmore or something? No, driving a bus. So I start talking to him a little bit. I remember my first, who'd you play for? The Baltimore Colts, and a little bit of background. Was Artie Donovan as outspoken then as he later became? And Rechichar just rolled his eyes. I mean, it was like, oh yeah, I had to deal with that in the locker room. I mean, you had the funny stories on the Tonight Show. Imagine, that you've got that guy in the locker room, and you gotta work with that guy, that sort of thing. Which was all he had to do was roll his eyes, and you got that perspective from him. But then I learned about him, and it was really an interesting story. I said, I want to do a piece on you in the Post-Gazette, and I'll link this on our 1420 WEMB Sports Radio Facebook page coming up. But I wanted to, do something with Bert Rechichar once I made the connection, because, as you know, I'm very into sports history, and this is a very interesting person. And not only did he kick the longest field goal in the history of the National Football League for a period of time that stood for 17 years. Record stood for 17 years until Tom Dempsey broke it in 1970. And of course, now Sebastian Janikowski and Jason Elam, they've been to Mile High Stadium. Not Mile High, but Denver, and the altitude's a little bit bigger, and they've got the 64-yard field goal. I still say that Tom Dempsey's 63-yarder is the greatest field goal in the history of the NFL. The record may have been broken, but I still say that's the greatest field goal because it won a game. The others, including Rechichar's, was before halftime. Although ultimately in a 13-10 victory against the Bears, it did win the game. But, there's more... Nobody had ever thought, it's the only field goal ever kicked that you didn't cross midfield and you were able to win the game, that sort of thing with it. And I know that, there have been kicks to win the Super Bowl since then, but they haven't been 63 yards. And this was, at the time, Dempsey's field goal was a huge upset. Saints, who were terrible, beating the Lions. I mean, the fact that they even attempted it was like, what are you doing? And it broke the record by 7 yards. Elam, Janikowski, they've broken it by 1. So I still say that Dempsey's field goal is the greatest in the NFL history. But anyway, Rechichar was the guy who had it. And Rechichar, by the way, was a big fan of Dempsey. He told me. So I thought it was great that he kicked it. I thought it was great he was the one that broke it. Not only by doing it in the way he did, but, here was the guy with half a foot and all this. I thought that was great that he was able to overcome that. And Bert Rechichar knew something about overcoming things. He was from Rostraver, PA. He would have, if it was today, have gone to the same high school as Joe Montana. If you heard our interview that has been archived with Ron Neckeye, and it is also on YouTube now, he talked a little bit about growing up, and he knew Bert Rechichar as a kid. They both were in the area of Monongahela, Pennsylvania, which is Joe Montana's hometown. It's about, 30, 35 miles south of Pittsburgh or so, right on the Monongahela River. Okay, so that's where it is. Charming town, But that's about where he grew. Rechichar grew up, but it wasn't so charming for him. His family, they were farmers. There you go. And he was 12 years old. His father was murdered. He was going to sell a cow, and guy didn't show up. It was going to, a livestock transaction. It had like $250 on it. Oh, what the hell? I'll go to the bar. There's beer. You see $250 on him. And it is kind of surprising because this is sort of, I know where this town is at, and it's not a real tough place, but then again, I know that it's sort of down below some steel mill towns, so, those can be kind of tough. And you can do the math. Somebody saw the $250 and they murdered Bert Rechichar's father. So that was the environment that he grew up in. But he was a star athlete, including basketball in high school at, like I said, Old Ross Draver High School. He signed his letter of commit to Tennessee, I think it was 1948, with a red crayon. He couldn't find anything else to write it with, in a basketball court at Ross Draver High. And so there you go. I'm up against it. I'm going to take this break and come back with more memories of Bert Rechichar after this.
At 1,200.